right. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to Key Conversations with Shae. Still feels weird to say that. We're doing this, though. We have some really great updates that I want to bring to you this time. We're going to start off talking about some things that have happened recently. In January, I went to the Inman conference, and there was a lot of information to digest from that. But one of the best things I can probably distill down to give you is over and over and over, I keep hearing from every source imaginable that the market is it is what it is this year, right? Interest rates, we don't know what's going to happen. They might go down a little bit. They might not. They might be at 6%. And historically, we know that that's not terrible, but we know that that's a pain point for our buyers, right? Because that's not what they've been accustomed to. So there's some education to do there. But by and large, we're at a place in the industry where one of the best things we can do for our consumers and for our community out there is to just be the best straight talker that we can be about the reality of the situation, right? It's not time for wishful thinking or telling people what we think they want to hear. It's time for us to deliver valuable content that's accurate and transparent. And that's what we want to be doing for our community, right? At Inman, they talked a lot about this situation, about where we are in the industry, and that really and truly it's time to double down and be that source for our community like we've always been. So think about that. When we're dealing with interest rates, when we're talking about affordability issues, we're talking about all these things, right? We want to be the folks in the room who are leading with clarity and leading with foresight, not necessarily leading with what we hope the market's going to do this year or what we think it's going to do. We don't know, but we know what it's doing right now. And so let's be that place of confident leadership for our community and for our consumers. Now, the next thing after the Inman conference in New York, of course, there was a little bit of downtime and then the TR conference, right? We had that Texas Realtors winter meeting, and there was a lot that went on behind the scenes there. There was a lot of conversations about legislation, about what we can do to help this new landscape, right? And so there's a lot of stuff going on that you're probably going to hear more about as some of those legislative efforts, really come to more fruition. Speaking of legislation, we all know that we got Realtor Day at the Capitol coming up next month, right? So stay tuned into that. There's going to be a lot more information coming about that as well. One thing that did come out during the TR conference, you might hear a little bit about this because depending on how many other associations you might be a member of, there have been 11 other associations in Texas that have gotten these CID notices from the Department of Justice, including Texas Realtors, because they want to get a little bit more insight into what they're digging into is all about the commingling rule, right? Commingling of listings. Now, HAR is not involved in this. That's great news. This is really just kind of some of the smaller associations, but it is a big deal in the state right now. And the reason that we're in this fix is because Texas Realtors trying to create a resource for some of these smaller associations to really be able to provide the right kind of guidance and sort of regulatory balance for their members, right? They provided bylaws as a template for some of these smaller associations to kind of pick and choose the way they wanted their MLS rules to look. And some of these smaller associations didn't pick and choose. They picked and chose everything. And so, for instance, the MLS commingling rule in their template, Texas Realtors talked about how there's a commingling rule that listings from other brokerages can be mingled together on a syndicated site, and there's a commingling rule that says they can't. And so they used the language for both of those for these associations to decide which way they wanted to go. And unfortunately, these associations just kind of put both in there, right? And so DOJ is trying to say, hey, which one are you going to stick with? Which one are you going to observe and enforce, and which one are you not? Because there's some contradiction here. That's all that's going on. But just know that if you hear about the DOJ digging into Texas Realtors and some of these associations, that's likely what they're talking about. And it does not have any impact on HAR at the moment. Speaking of HAR, there's another little update, right? If you guys remember back in December, we had an all member meeting, and we had a lot of conversation. It was a lively discussion about some of the bylaws, and there were some changes that were proposed, and those changes did not pass. And I told everybody at the beginning of December, don't worry, we're going to have plenty of time to put together a task force to look at this issue and dig into proposing a more reasonable solution, right? Everybody was really concerned and wanted to make sure we had plenty of time to do that before the elections started happening. Well, I wanted to give you a little bit of update. We have a great start on that already. We've put together a task force that is looking through that. And let me just describe a little bit of that task force and the work that they're doing right now. The task force is actually made up of 11. I wanted to do 11. 10 seemed like a really great number, but if we all agreed or all were split 5 and 5, we needed a tiebreaker. So I opted for 11. On that task force, there was myself and Teresa Hill as the chair-elect. We also had 4 members of the board of directors, and my thinking on that was really that we would have 2 members who'd been on the board a while, kind of give some sort of a seasoned insight and maybe a little bit of history. I wanted 2 board members that were brand new, wanted some fresh voices at the table. So those 4 board members were Joanne Stevens, who's a broker of a small brokerage, Linda Ferguson, who's also a broker of a small brokerage, Jamie Bertrand, who is also a broker of a small brokerage, and Ricky Gonzalez, who works with a large brokerage. So I wanted to make sure that as far as the board of directors went and the people involved from the board, I wanted to make sure there was a really good representation of those small brokerages, because I know that that's really important. Then we added 5 non-board members. So just members at large that had expressed an interest. Those 5 members were Michigan Guillory, again, another small broker, Shae Ralph Short. Obviously, she's with a large broker, but this is a great opportunity because Shae was in that room 12 years ago when they redid those bylaws. Then she brings a lot of historical perspective, and I'm so glad for her involvement. Besides Shae, we also have Kelly Simon, who's the broker owner of Kelly Simon Properties. She's a medium-sized brokerage, and she's a great leader. I really am looking forward to her voice. Deirdre Lehman is number 10, and she's another small broker, and also Ward Arendt. I love Ward. We've had a long history together, and just really valuable insight, and I love his contribution. So again, another small broker. So really wanting to make sure that we have all the right voices at the table that give perspective and insight. You're going to be hearing more about this as we kind of come through this process, and don't worry, it's all going to happen in plenty of time. We're going to get this straightened out before the election. So it's all good. Speaking of all good, I want to tell you about my guest that you're about to listen to or watch, whatever platform you're doing, right? Tracy Brown. Oh my goodness. Tracy has worked with us at HAR for 4 years now. And 3 of the focus areas that she supported are, number 1, a focus on what realtors need to do to understand the cultures of the consumers that they are out serving. Number 2, what realtors can do to grow their businesses in this multicultural market that Houston is recognized as the most diverse city in the country. And she's equipping us to help meet those needs. Number 3, ways that realtors with different professional and cultural backgrounds learn from one another and can help each other succeed. If Tracy had a theme song, it would probably be People Make the World Go Round. And just a fun fact about her, one of her favorite things to do when she isn't working is to go roller skating. Tracy, I am so glad you're here. Let's all listen in. This is a great conversation.
Old school quads, 4 wheels. And it wasn't pretty when I tried to use inline or rollerblades. And so that happened twice. The first time it was horrible. The second time it was worse.
I don't even know how you stop on those inline ones. I tried it once and I couldn't stop, which did not end well. But yeah. So you neither. That's not your jam. No.
No.
Well, go ahead. No, you look like you're about to say something.
One of the things that I didn't realize for a long time, but in the last few years, I've realized that part of the reason I love roller skating so much is because it really is, there are so many parallels to the work that I do with organizations. So
Mm.
when I'm roller skating and I'm moving through all these obstacles, but at the same time, I have to be able to work with the people who are in the ring because I mostly skate inside in roller rinks. And so there are all these different kind of people. They're all moving in different ways, dancing on skates to the music. Different music requires different speeds and skills. And I have to know enough and I have to be alert enough to be able to be myself and do what I want to do, but kind of in conjunction with everyone else. And that's really the work that I do in organizations, is helping people work effectively with other people, especially people who are thinking differently, doing something different, have a different background, see the
Yeah.
world in a different way.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I love that metaphor of roller skating because it really, you're right. It kind of captures a lot of that. You've got to make sure that you're paying attention to everybody else. You can't get in their way. You've got to let them be who they are and get to where they're going and do what they're doing. At the same time, you got to get to where you're going and you got to watch for them.
And every now and then there's a crash.
And how do you handle those crashes?
And how do you handle those crashes without yelling, screaming, or cursing somebody out, right? And so, every now and then there's a crash or a clash, and you help each other, you hold each other up, or you actually correct the other person, or they correct you. But then you get up and you start skating again.
You just get back at it.
Yeah.
I'm in Austin today, which I feel a little bit displaced. I'm a homebody. I love being at home, but I'm up here at ABOR at the Austin Board of Realtors, and the reason I'm up here is we had a big masterclass workshop for a bunch of agents. Broker agnostic. It was just for a bunch of different brokerages, a bunch of different agents. We had a panel, and one of the things that really kind of came out in that panel discussion is, regardless of the brokerage, regardless of our background, there really aren't competitors in this industry if we choose that. We can all be collaborators. And what I saw today in that conversation was just such a beautiful representation of that sort of cross boundary collaboration. But there are those clashes, and sometimes it is difficult to bridge those gaps. What do you feel like are, I guess we just jump right into it, right? When you come across some of those clashes or tense moments, what are some things that you use in your work to kind of bridge those gaps?
I think one of the most important things that has happened is the realization that there are going to be clashes. Like, it doesn't mean everything is broken just because someone has a different perspective or they've had a different experience. That's not the problem, right? The problem is, do we have the skills to be able to say, okay, wait, that means we need to slow down. If it's a big enough clash, you slow down automatically because, right, it's like it breaks, the relationship breaks. But it's mostly, if I know that there are going to be clashes, there are going to be misunderstandings, there are going to be differences of opinion, then I need to have the skill to be able to have the conversation. Like, the clash is not avoiding all clashes is not the goal. Because if you have
Mm,
different skills, different ideas, different experiences, you're not going to agree all the time. You don't even agree all the time with the people who you have a great relationship with. And so we know how to get through misunderstandings with the people we love, with the people we spend our lives with, like family or neighbors we've been living next door to for a while. But it seems like when we're in the work environment or in the business environment, we forget that we know. We know how to say, okay, this is what you're doing or saying, this is what I'm doing or saying, where's the bridge? So a
mm.
lot of my work is about helping people build cross-cultural bridges when the challenge or the cause of the breakdown is language or age or just having a different perspective about something.
You know, so you said something right at the beginning of that's a total paradigm shift. I think for at least for me and maybe for a lot of folks, this idea that avoidance of the clash isn't the goal. I'm a people pleaser. You know, I love to make people happy. That's just part of my makeup, and that's a quickly toxic part of me. But it's a really easy thing to want to avoid those tense moments. And it's, for me, a lot of times it's easy to come at that as, or to see that as a strength. But in the moment when you just said that, I started like digesting that a little bit. And I feel like sometimes that avoidance maybe keeps me from growing through those moments.
Yeah. And it is not a goal to constantly be in conflict. I mean, that it should not be the goal. For people who that is their goal, to always be stirring up trouble, always be disagreeing, always being difficult. No, we don't want to do that. We don't want to create or be in conflict all the time. But it is important to realize that to get the most out of people and to have the most people feel seen, valued, and respected, then you're not going to agree all the time. I don't even know what I don't know, right?
Mm.
So, Shae, you may say something to me that I don't understand or I really do disagree with. But if I don't talk to you about it, if I don't say, I'm not so sure, that doesn't fit well with me. But if I don't follow that up with, tell me more or make it make sense to me.
Hmm.
Not challenge, but as I'm really curious at first to see where you're coming from. And then you may say something and I go, well, actually, that makes perfect sense to me. I just hadn't thought about that. Or I didn't even know that was an option.
Hmm.
So knowing that's an option, maybe we could compromise and take this from my idea and this from your idea in order to serve the HAR members better.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so, but if I avoid the conflict, I'm either going to do one of two things. I'm going to go on this, one far end and just not saying anything, even though I didn't like what you said, or right, I'm just going to make you think I agree with you. Or I'm going to go to this other end where, okay, now we've got to debate and fight it out and see if you're right or I'm right, but I know I'm right. So I have to make you wrong. And, those are two extremes. And when we have
Hmm.
people who are very different from one another, groups of people who have different norms or different experiences in the
Hmm.
world, the only way to create an environment where everyone can participate is to be able to listen and have a conversation to see where your common ground is.
You know, it reminds me of, for me, our industry is really inundated with, whether or not you want to call it like militaristic language or sports language, but this idea of negotiating a contract where, there has to be a winner and a loser. We won this deal, and if I won, that means somebody else had to lose.
Yes.
And that I don't know if it's just because of that, or if there are other influences in our culture or whatever that influences that kind of language. But I see that happens a lot, and not just in real estate, but
Yes.
in relationships.
Yes. Yes. Culturally, in the US and in Western culture in general, in the US, culturally, even though we say, there are some of our values that are very, everyone together and everyone from everywhere. Historically, that's been something that we have valued in the US. At the same time, there are a lot of things that create separation and competition. And the best, there's a singular best, not four ways of doing something. And so in life in general, a lot of that, the myth of an individual being able to pull himself up by his bootstraps, like you have to do it as an individual. And, there's so many things like that that are subtle socializations that we, have grown up in and that we teach to others. At the same time, we say we have cultural norms or cultural values that say, we'll all pull together. And we see that happen in a disaster or an emergency, like the fire in California, right? Or where everybody in the community comes together to support one another. So we have to choose which one will we be led by. And in different situations, maybe you choose a different framework. But in the world of business, there has been a lot of focus on competition, which gets to be troublesome, or maybe it's just confusing, right? Because HAR exists to make sure all members of HAR have the opportunity and the resources to be successful in business. So even the mission of the association is really about the collective, but you will have some members who are about themselves as an individual. So in HAR, you have to balance kind of both of those. I'm here representing HAR, which is about all of us together and giving everyone opportunities and giving people resources that they need. Every member may not feel the same way. They may be just looking at their own individual success.
Right. Yeah. And everybody has a different definition of that, which makes it a little more nuanced, but you're absolutely right. And that's, I think, one of the biggest challenges in leadership period is, looking at, you've got the membership as a singular unit, and then you've got the members as individual collective members of that unit. When we saw each other last, of course, my days and weeks run together these days, but I think it was January. I think it was last month when we had lunch at that great restaurant with all those great affiliate leaders everywhere. And we were talking about just things that, it was one of our great conversations that we always have. And it was really kind of involving some things that I'd been reading, some things that you'd been thinking about, and you used a phrase that I wanted to go back to, and it was, you might have to refine the phrase because I'm sure I'm going to butcher it, but it was something along the lines of unity without uniformity.
Yeah, I've been really focusing on that a lot with the groups I'm a member of or a part of, as well as with some of the organizations I'm supporting. I think with HAR especially, and in the real estate industry overall, I think it is really that phrase, unity. How do we have unity without requiring uniformity? I just, when that phrase, I've used it before in the past, kind of in passing. But when I was thinking about HAR in 2025, it feels like that is exactly what's happening, that there are so many things going on in the world. There are so many things going on in the political arena. There's so many things going on in the social arena. There's so many things going on in the business world and, buying, selling, and leasing property, that we want unity. We want all realtors to be supportive of all realtors and of, property rights and of all the things that are important in the industry. But at the same time, there's a lot of tension if you don't do it the same way I do it, or if you don't think about it the way I think about it. But historically, there's never been uniformity in the industry. So it just seems to me like that's a perfect phrase to capture the challenges that leaders face. How do we create unity without requiring uniformity?
There's got to be a whole lot of grace in there somewhere. Just, I think that's a great way to put that. I love that phrase. I'm going to use that. I will give you all the credit.
No, I don't need any credit. But here's the other thing you said that requires a lot of grace. But let's also think about that provides a lot of creativity, right? So there's never been uniformity, right? What your commercial real estate brokers and agents need, it doesn't look anything like someone who is representing people who are leasing property, residential. And luxury residential is not uniformity with first-time home buyers. And so I think realtors have a lot of experience already that says we're not uniform. There is no uniformity about how we do the business, even who our primary consumer or client is. So that's not new. Realtors may have more skill than some others in saying we're all in this one industry together. We all live in this metropolitan area together, but we don't have to be the same, to be united, to be respectful of one another, to be supportive of one another. But we haven't thought about it that way.
So is there a trick, some sort of Tracy hack to being supportive and understanding even when there's disagreement?
The word that immediately came to mind is respect. And that's not always, magic, because different people do define respect differently. But in general, the magic sauce, the secret sauce is being respectful of others and also maintaining respect for yourself. But that is not about entitlement, like my way has to be or my way is the best way. And that's what's hard. I think we have to let go of a lot of things like entitlement, like this whole idea, there's always a hierarchy of some kind, but we still can show respect to everyone, even if they do it differently than we do, unless we're talking about safety or life or death.
That makes sense.
Legality or life and death, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Houston is, I think, still considered the most diverse city in the country. With your work with HAR and, not just our organization, but with our agents and our leadership and the staff, what would you say are maybe some insights you've seen along the way on how we can be a more inclusive industry in this city specifically? I that may be a curveball, but do you have any thoughts on that?
It is a curveball, and I have thoughts on it. Observations. Observations are really the big observation is that you, meaning not just HAR, but HAR, the staff, realtors in general, and some of the people in the affiliate groups, it's like obvious to me as someone who didn't know the industry from the inside out. It's obvious to me that there are people in this industry who already know. Like you already have examples of people who are going to the nth degree to support others and to engage with others. So it's not something that has to be created from scratch. That there really are a lot of people who care about others and who want to help others be successful. On the not totally on the other side of the pendulum swing, but there are folks in the industry who are just competitive or thinking it is only about their way. And what I see happening is that they can be very vocal and they can be very demanding, but it doesn't seem like they are the majority. And so part of what happens in a situation like that, or is in a scenario like that, is remembering that, in any organization, in any change, and whenever there are a lot of different views, that 66, 2/3 of the people are kind of in the middle and are very pragmatic. And you may have 10 to 15% at either end of the spectrum. So the caution is that I've cautioned other organizations about is you have to be careful that you don't design all your policies and all your programs and all your activities around the 10 to 15% max who are going to complain about it, or who are not going to understand, or who are going to tell you you are outright wrong and shouldn't be doing something. Just like you wouldn't design a new program and commit hundreds of thousands of dollars to it if it was only going to benefit 8% or 10% of your membership. So that it's tricky though, because whoever makes the most noise gets a lot of attention. The HAR just has to, for example, just like any other organization, just has to really constantly ask the question, how does this serve the majority of our members? And how do we create that sense of, and I know you love this word, but how does that create the sense of belonging when when we have more than 45,000 members? How do we create that for as many members as possible? So the affiliate groups, the affinity associations, are doing that and are also seeing how collaborating can really improve business for everyone.
Mm.
And the board of directors, also, I've seen some examples of, yeah, we want to come together and we want to serve the majority of people, not just 5% or 10%.
So in thinking about the industry, specifically the context of Houston and our membership, what are some practical steps? I imagine members listening or watching, team leads, brokers. What are some practical steps that brokers, team leads can utilize to create a true sense of belonging for agents, for staff, for clients from all background? Maybe as a little bit of a qualifier there, or to carry it a little further, real estate as a second generation realtor, one of the things I've seen my whole life is that agents really have a unique capacity to build and shape communities, unlike most other industries. What are some thoughts you might have there for teams, brokers, that kind of thing, that are looking to make those kinds of impacts?
So what's happening in my brain, even though you can't see it, is it's going like this. I know you can relate to this.
I'm here for it. Yep.
So I'm going to reel some of that in by thinking start, stop, continue. Start, stop, continue. So if you're not already doing this, one of the things you can start doing is actually initiating conversations about what people perceive for themselves as what would be helpful to help you be successful with the consumers you're reaching, or if you're a team leader, what would help you be successful with the team that you are leading? Initiate the conversation rather than waiting until there's a problem or a clash. By initiating the conversation, what happens is you stop assuming based on what you would need what someone else needs. And the need is influenced by someone's age, their culture, their length of time in the profession, right? Their education, maybe even their religion, if it affects what days they work or what days, like how they manage their schedule, their marital status. All of those things and many, many more affect what people need in order to go forward. So one thing to start doing to create a sense of belonging and to really move toward inclusion is those conversations in a proactive way to find out what different people or people who are different from you might need. One of the things, start, stop, continue. One of the things that you want to stop doing, or the things that come to mind, of course, stop avoiding conflict, right? Bring up things that need to be addressed before they become a big thing or a barrier, and it won't be so hard. And that
Mhm.
creates the sense of belonging, because then if Shae, if you come to me and say, hey, in our meeting last week, you made this comment, and I it hit me at the time, but I wasn't sure why. And now, a week later, I just need more information about that. And what did you mean by that? And how does it apply to what we were talking about? Well, if you do that, what that says to me is I'm not in trouble. I'm not worried about being in trouble. It makes you seem curious and that you are seeking to understand, not judge. So
Mhm.
stop hiding, stop waiting, and stop assuming that what someone else's behavior means is what it would mean if you said or did that. Start, stop, continue. So if you're already doing this, I would highly encourage you to continue to have conversations with people who are very different from you, just to learn more about how the work affects them, how the community affects them. The community they live in is different from your own, because that will translate into your service and support of clients who are different from you. So not only, if you're in a brokerage and there are a lot of agents, not only does it help you build a stronger team, but it gives you more confidence and more competence to reach out and expand who you are marketing to, and to feel comfortable that you will be able to communicate effectively with them and serve them in a way that meets your standards.
I love that. That's good stuff. Everything you're talking about, it almost feels like or sounds like it's a muscle that the more you use it, the more refined it gets, or the more experienced you get at paying attention to it, or however it works. Yeah, I like that. The more that we intentionally do that in one circle, it just kind of necessarily bleeds into those other circles. I think
Yeah.
that's a good stop. Yeah. Well, yeah, perfect. That's good stuff, and I think that's a great sort of way to end this conversation. Just this one. We'll continue our conversations like always, but I think that's a good resonating note to just kind of hang for anybody who might be listening or watching. Tracy, thank you so much for being here and agreeing to this, and thank you for all the work that you do. It matters to a lot of people, and I appreciate you.